Thank you for tuning into our Minnesota Senate Candidate Forum. All candidates in Senate District 49 and 50 were invited to participate in this forum. Due to COVID-19, this forum is being recorded without an audience, and all safety precautions recommended by the Minnesota Department of Health and the City of Bloomington are being followed. Hello everyone, I'm Amanda Crombie, co-president of the League of Women Voters Bloomington. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that never endorses any political party or candidate. Our purpose in hosting this forum is to provide you, the public, with the opportunity to learn more about the candidates so that you can make informed voting decisions. Your vote is your power. Let it be heard. A reminder, the general election is on Tuesday, November 3rd, but early voting in Minnesota begins on September 18th. To request your absentee ballot, go to mnvotes.org. Also, the League of Women Voters Bloomington 2020 Nonpartisan Voter Guide is now available at Civic Plaza. Swing by and pick one up. It's free. So please vote, Bloomington.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's general election candidate forum for Minnesota State Senate candidates in Districts 49 and 50. This forum is being recorded in council chambers, Bloomington City Plaza, without an audience. The City of Bloomington's coronavirus safety protocol is being followed. I'm Deb Brinkman. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park, and I'll be your moderator this evening. The purpose of this evening's forum is to hear the candidates for Minnesota Senate District 49 and Minnesota Senate District 50 discuss issues that are important to you. We'll try to cover as many issues as possible in the time that we have. If your questions aren't addressed here this evening, please feel free to contact the candidates directly. The views in this forum are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. The fact that the League is sponsoring this forum does not imply support of any candidates. Here are the rules and format for tonight's forum. Speaking order was set before the forum and will alternate with each question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 90 seconds to answer each question posed by the moderator, and 1 minute for a closing statement. League volunteers will time candidate responses and hold up signs to show candidates how much time they have left and when they must stop. Candidates, please finish your sentence and obey the stop sign. Questions for today's forum were submitted by Bloomington residents by email. Residents were invited by the League of Women Voters Bloomington website, League of Women Voters Bloomington Facebook page, and a news release distributed by the Sun Current. As moderator, I'll ask all the questions. League of Women Voters Bloomington determines which questions will be asked and attempts in good faith to cover the topics of interest indicated by the submitted questions. All submitted questions become the property of the League of Women Voters Bloomington. So now we'll go to the introduction of the candidates. First, for Senate District 49 is Melissa Lopez Franzen. She's the Democratic candidate. Her opponent, Julie Dupre, is the Republican candidate, did not reply to the invitation to participate. For Senate District 50, Mr. Dean William Monbleau is the Republican candidate, and he has declined to participate. Ms. Melissa Halverson Wickland is the Democratic candidate and is here tonight to participate. Thank you. So let's first start with opening remarks by Ms. Franzen. We start with alphabetical order. And then Melissa Wickland, you'll start with the closing remarks. So that's how we'll keep things fair. So Ms. Franzen, feel free to start with your opening remarks.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. And it's a pleasure to be with you. And I've always attended the League of Women Voters events, and this has been my 8th year serving in the Minnesota Senate. I did come in at the same time as my colleague who's also here, Senator Wickland, and it's been an honor to represent Bloomington in the Minnesota Senate. I think it's one of the most complex and fascinating cities in our state. We have not only the Mall of America, the airport, we have so many economic drivers for our state. It's a very important part of our state, and it's been a pleasure to get to know it over the last 8 years more in depth. I am running for my third term, and I am looking for your support. I know we are going through a very different political climate, for lack of a better description, and certainly the conversation that we're having here today would have been better to have it individually at the door. But the campaign has changed and our playbook has changed, and we have to be nimble to make sure that all Minnesotans are safe at home. And that's why we're wearing our masks, socially distancing, and doing this remotely and virtually. I would love to have your support. Like I mentioned, I've been in the legislature for a few years, and I want to continue to work and tackle the issues, especially the budget. We have an approximately $6 billion deficit and growing because of the pandemic, and Minnesota was in a good place. We had a reserve, we had a surplus, and obviously with the deficit happening now because of the pandemic and all over our state and nation and country and the world, we are going to have to tackle big issues of prioritization of where we're going to spend, and we're going to have to make some reductions. So I look forward to be part of that discussion after serving in Health and Human Services for 6 years and the Finance Committee currently. It's going to be a very interesting session in 2021, and I look forward to be there to represent your voice when we make those decisions. And thank you again for hosting this to the League.
Thank you, Melissa Franzen. Melissa Wickland.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And first, thank you to the League. Thank you for hosting this event and having a chance for us to come and be able to be visible, and although not in person, we can still have a chance to connect with voters. My name is Melissa Halverson Wickland, and I serve Senate District 50. It's been an honor to serve Senate District 50 in the Minnesota Senate for the past 8 years, and I also serve part of Richfield in my Senate district. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and be able to talk with voters, although I wish that we were able to do so in person. We are able to make some adjustments and then be able to convey our thoughts online and on the TV. And I hope that you'll reach out to me if you have further questions after tonight. I have served in my role in the Senate on committees having to do with healthcare and education and local government. Those have been my key priority areas. And I have had the privilege of serving in Bloomington, where we have many complex issues going on in all of those areas. Over the past few months, I've really enjoyed, or really been consumed, I guess is a better word, with addressing the COVID pandemic as much as we are able to in the legislature. And that's been through serving our constituents who have issues that need assistance, as well as mapping out priorities for us to be addressing in the legislature. So I look forward to questions and talking more about those issues tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa Wickland. All right, the first question, Melissa Franzen, we'll start with you. What are your top 3 legislative priorities, and what do you hope to accomplish through those priorities?
Thank you for the question. Like I mentioned in my introductory remarks, the budget is the top priority for me. I've decided to serve in the Finance Committee and move to that committee this last session, to understand the complexities of it. Most of the budget, in terms of where the dollars are coming and the different interactions with our federal government partners, is in Health and Human Services. And as we all know that with the COVID pandemic, there's been a spotlight in terms of the accessibility of healthcare, the accessibility of mental health services, housing. All these issues were always top of mind for Minnesotans, and now they've just been exacerbated and amplified because of COVID. So in understanding how we're going to tackle healthcare is my second top priority. priority, and one of the issues is how do we expand access to people to be able to have a health care that they can afford when they lose their jobs. So this whole notion that we have to be employer-based health care is very complicated, and we need to start looking at other models like the public option and making sure that everyone has a minimum plan that they can rely on. And then thirdly, I've served on transportation for all my time in the Minnesota Legislature, and I'm excited to continue to work on hopefully having sustainability in funding for transportation projects like the Southwest Light Rail that was just recently finally approved by the federal government.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Melissa Wickland.
Yeah, I'd say my top three priorities, although there are many things that we always are constantly dealing with in the legislature. I guess the top certainly is going to be next year is the budget, and the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on our budget will be cause us to have to make very difficult decisions about how to move forward and create a balanced budget for our state. My priority will be to do so without causing additional stress and harm to those who are experiencing the greatest impacts due to the COVID-19 pandemic, those who are our lower wage earners and our families who are experiencing great deals of stress and difficulties. Another priority for me will be to work on health care. In my last term, I have been working on healthcare, how to reduce costs for people, how to make sure that healthcare is more affordable than it is right now. And another priority for me will be to continue to work on issues that our families are facing with access to high quality early childhood and childcare. So those will be three that I will hope to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. All right, this next question, Melissa Wickland, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Largely due to the economic fallout from the pandemic, Minnesota's state budget looks bleak. How do you propose to deal with this? Please address both spending and revenue. The budget outlook, what we know so far, it is really very bleak. I think that we will have to be addressing our budget on a multifaceted way. We will have to look at ways that we can possibly make changes in programs to save money. We will have to look at ways that we can raise revenues. And those could be through tax increases on those who have not been as negatively impacted, the more wealthy taxpayers. It could be through other tax revenue changes. And also, I'm hoping that we will have some support and assistance for the federal government, although that is definitely unclear at this point. We also have a budget reserve, and that will be part of the solution as well, because that's why we keep a reserve, is to address challenges that we're facing. So I think it'll be a combination of all of those different methods that we will have to use. And I'm sure there will be difficult choices in areas. I hope that we can preserve education and human services programs as much as possible, because those are our future depends on our children being educated. So thank you. Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you for the question. I agree that it has to be looked upon. Everything's on the table. I believe that we have to obviously start with discretionary spending, and that needs to be evaluated. And potentially, that's where we can start making some necessary adjustments and cuts. Potentially, also new revenue can come in, and those are all scalable. And raising taxes is not the easiest thing, and it's certainly not the first thing that we would probably look at least not in my mindset, looking at the existing revenues coming in and how we can adjust some of those levers in our budget and have some cost measures as well. I came from the private sector. I know there's ways you can minimize costs. You need to cut excess meals and in travel and all that. In a corporate setting, we can find ways to do similar cuts in the discretionary spending of agencies. But at the end of the day, health and human services and education are the biggest parts of our budget. And I, as a mother of a new kindergarten student that just started this week, I know how much schools are struggling with all the additional challenges of COVID, and we want to make sure that they're safe, secure, and that our kids can learn. So I will do all I can to hold health education harmless, and also to continue to support the essential services that our Health and Human Services budget provides for Minnesotans. So those are areas that I will look to be surgical and not just have a straight line cut throughout.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Melissa Franzen, we'll start with you with this next question. Now, do you envision a northern Minnesota where mining and conservation can coexist? Is copper nickel mining an existential threat to the Boundary Waters, or are environmentalists a threat to the mining economy of northern Minnesota, and why?
Well, that's a great question and a long one. I'll start with the beginning. I think we can coexist. I think we can all agree that we need to have jobs in the northern Iron Range area, and we also need to have, if mining is going to occur, because it is, because we all rely on it for some of the products that we consume, that we should be doing it better and safer in our country versus in another country where you can have child labor and you can have minimal regulations for the environment and for workers. So absolutely, I think Minnesota and the United States can do a great job to make sure that mining is done in a safe way. I love the Boundary Waters, just like every Minnesotan does, including Iron Rangers and the up north, because that is their backyard. I enjoy it very much with my family, and I want to make sure that we preserve what we have. We preserve our water and the quality of life that we have up north as well. So I think we can coexist. It's a matter of having the right regulations in place, and if we need to change them, then that's the role of the legislature, to change them to make sure that we ensure that we have the environmental safety precautions for the next generation. And certainly I'm open to working with all stakeholders, and I know this has been a really difficult issue with Minnesotans, but I think we can coexist.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Franzen and Melissa Wickland.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think that as we look at the area in northern Minnesota today, mining and environmental and tourism and environmental needs and logging and all of these things are coexisting. But I do have really strong concerns about the two proposed mines that are working their way through the process that they need to go through to become to be put in place. I think that we need to be very thoughtful about how we look at an environmental area that is pristine and is a wilderness, and how we can absolutely protect that for future generations. My family enjoys going to northern Minnesota and the Boundary Waters, and I think that there are ways that we can ensure that any project that is proposed for the area goes through a very rigorous process, and I believe that process is what is being followed now. But I do think that as it goes through the process, we need to make sure that it's done in an open, accountable, and transparent way, so that we are ensured that anything put in place is safe and will be not damage the environment.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Wickland, and we'll start with you for this next question. Given the current developments in Minnesota and across the country regarding policing and race, how can the Minnesota Legislature simultaneously support police reform policing, and build public trust in the police?
Well, I think that the legislature has a key role to play as a statewide, as something that, we can make laws that affect all cities and all of the residents of Minnesota. And I think that we have, over the past few months, heard from many people and many communities that they feel today they don't feel that the police and public safety system is serving them well, and that we have room to make improvements in that. This summer, we had many discussions about ways to create greater police accountability to the public. I believe that the people in Bloomington and all across the state want to feel safe in their communities, and the police are definitely something that they're needed in the community, and they play a role in providing that safety. So we had passed a bill in July that did address some initial police reforms and put in place some new ideas, but I think we still have a long ways to go and a lot of discussion that we need to have about whether communities of color feel that more reforms are needed to make sure that everyone does feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. And after the death of George Floyd, I think all Minnesotans and certainly the entire country has gone through a lot of hurt and really deep conversations about the role of public safety and how we police our neighborhoods. And we're lucky to live where we do in Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Edina, and Minnetonka, which is part of Senate District 49. We have great policing. I have a business in Minneapolis, right off a lake in Lindale, so right in the heart of where that unrest happened, and certainly know a lot of people that live, are my friends and neighbors. We need to make sure that we instill and restore public trust in our public safety and on our police. We did pass the bill that Senator Wickland referenced. It's a first step. It's still a work in progress, I would say. We did pass some measures that are common sense measures, like eliminate the chokehold and certainly ban its use, and also an oversight and training for police officers. We worked with all stakeholders. There's more work to be done. We're not out of this topic. It's not going to be fixed and changed overnight, especially not with just one bill. There's a lot of inequities in our state system, and it poses a lot of concerns for communities, especially communities of color. And we need to make sure that we are continuing to have those discussions, but also pass legislation at the state capitol that eliminates those disparities as much as we can.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. And Melissa Franzen, we'll start with you with this next question. With transportation funding, would you prioritize roads and bridges, public transit, or alternatives such as bicycling, trails, and sidewalks? Which of these is most urgent and why?
Well, I think all of them are important, and I believe after having the stay-at-home order, most Minnesotans really appreciated that we've invested so much in our parks and trails, in our pedestrian and transit systems, and I believe we need to continue to invest in all of them. And when there's opportunities to leverage dollars at the federal level, like we did with Southwest Light Rail, which is one of the issues that I worked on when I first came to the legislature, that again is finally approved as of this week to finally get the last federal funding. I also have supported the gas tax, and that's a way that we can continue to fund our transportation, because the gas tax does not go for transit. It goes directly for roads and bridges through a formula all the way to our local communities. We also have to look how we help those communities in greater Minnesota that receive a lot of the tax base from the metro area for transportation, and how do we equitably distribute funding now that people are driving less and vehicles are more efficient, so the dollars coming in from that revenue stream of the gas tax is less. So is there a discussion we're going to have in this next session, is whether it's a timing to do something in that regard. I support sustainable funding, because we need to rely on our roads and bridges to be safe for commerce, for people to drive on them, and for our pedestrians to also feel safe, and cyclists as well. So I support all of them, but it has to be a comprehensive package.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Melissa Wickland.
Thank you. Yes, I would also support really in all of the above approach to transportation. I think that transportation issues that we face in the state have to do with existing roads and bridges that we need to maintain, and we need to have sufficient sustainable funding to maintain our roads and bridges. But we also need to develop transit systems and maintain and encourage use of transit to help relieve some of the congestion and provide alternatives for people who choose not to have cars and to be able to get to work. I think that as a state we have done, and in Bloomington also have done more to encourage walking, biking, and use of our natural resources, which is great, and that's got to be part of the solution as well to help environmentally to reduce emissions, and so it's really got to be a comprehensive sort of sustainable way of looking at transportation. We have huge projects in our district, such as the 494-35W interchange, which we were able to successfully get funding for part of that, but there's a lot more to be done. Thanks.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. And Melissa Wickland, we'll start with you with this next question. In the context of the pandemic, racial tensions, and the upcoming elections, gun and ammunition sales have increased. In light of this, do you support new gun owner protections or expanded background checks and red flag laws?
Thank you. I do support and have supported over the past few years bills that have been proposed to increase common sense gun regulation in Minnesota. Gun violence is all too common, and I think that we need to be enacting more laws to address gun violence. And one way to do that would be to pass a bill that has to do with expanding background checks to make sure that all those purchasing guns are subject to the background check. I also support the red flag bill because I do think that we need to have a process for people to be, if they're identified as being in a situation where guns are present, we need to have a process for law enforcement to be able to remove guns from homes. I also think that we need to do more on gun education to make sure that guns are always stored safely. I think that we hear too often about children being hurt by guns in homes and in unintended ways, and we could be doing more to make sure that that doesn't happen as well. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. When it comes to gun safety, I always think of common sense. We're not going after people who are law-abiding and are responsible gun owners. But every constitutional right has its limits. I'm an attorney by trade, and we can argue one issue, one side or the other. But I really do think it comes down to common sense. We've seen so much increase in violence in our schools, violence in our streets, because there's people who are not responsible gun owners, and those are the ones we want to make sure have less access to guns. So if the laws that we're proposing, like red flag laws, which I've co-hosted or co-sponsored in the Minnesota Senate, and I support, if they seem like an inconvenience, well, I'd rather have someone go through an inconvenience than losing someone's life. It's common sense for me. And we can argue it if you're completely against it. I respect your position. But I think we need to protect our kids and going to school. And we should find ways that we treat mental health, that we find ways that we support families going through crisis. And what we can do in the Minnesota Senate and the Legislature is support common sense restrictions on how to access guns illegally, and do it in a safe and secure way. And I also support sensible background checks that close some loopholes. And again, if it's an inconvenience, I'm sorry, but I prefer to really preserve life.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. And Melissa Franzen, we'll start with you with this next question. Given the surge in homelessness, what do you think the Minnesota Legislature can do to make housing affordable for Minnesotans of limited means?
Well, we could start with a bonding bill that increases housing supports, and I've always supported that. In my first term, we did increases in bonding for housing bonds, and those are competitive, and we always run out because it's not enough. And there's a saying that if you build affordable housing, they will fill it. Well, because we don't have enough of it. There is a problem where people are working a full-time job or a few jobs at a time and still can't provide stable housing. And when we don't have stable housing, when people who, again, in the mental health world, when you don't have stable housing, how can you get better? How can you take care of your family? You need stable housing. That's a fundamental piece of how do we move forward in economic prosperity. And we have to make sure that we have that funding. So bonding is one of them. And certainly other areas of supporting ability for people who cannot work also have those supports. So I'm not looking for getting people. We have an epidemic right now of homelessness in Minnesota. You see some of our parks are witness of what is going on. We have a crisis and we need to address it. And it's with responsible ways of leveraging state dollars to build affordable housing that people can afford to live in and pay on their own so they can stand up, work, and take care of their own families.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Melissa Wickland.
Yeah, I think access to a home is essential. Families with children, having a stable place for children to grow up in is absolutely essential to provide them a foundation for being able to access their education, to learn and grow. And some ways that we have looked at addressing homelessness would be, as Senator Franzen mentioned, through bonding, through using grants to actually build or bonds to actually build more affordable housing. We've also seen efforts to pass legislation that assists cities in establishing new ways of incentivizing builders to build more affordable housing, because there are costs involved in building any type of housing, and in order to try and make sure that they are allocating some units to be affordable for people, there may be ways that cities can get involved and provide incentives for that. And I know Bloomington is a leader in that area. But we also need to look at homelessness from a whole person standpoint and make sure that we have adequate mental health services available as well.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. And Melissa Wickland, we'll start with you with this next question. Would you strive to make Minnesota's energy grid carbon-free? If so, by when and how? If not, but why not?
Well, I do support the idea that we need to make our energy grid carbon-free, and I do believe that right now people are using the year maybe 2050 as being a goal for that, and a bill that has moved through in the legislature. We have not passed that bill, but it's been under discussion. I have not been on the energy or environment committees, and I've worked more on healthcare and education. But I think that we can all see around us that climate change is a threat to all of us. and all of our children's futures. And it is absolutely required of us to put the efforts forward to reduce our use of carbon fuels and find the best way to get to the energy sources that we need, but not at the impact on the environment that we're having right now. So I work with my colleagues and learn from them what are some of the best ways that we can move forward, and I will continue to do that if I'm elected to serve another term. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. I certainly support a Minnesota version of the Green New Deal. We tried to pass something similar last session, and there were too many off-ramps, so we're still working on it. A lot of the energy industry needs some time to transition, but there's a government imperative to kind of push the industry and to move in that direction. Look, we're not seeing companies building coal plants anymore. They're actually basically phasing them out. Excel's doing that. Other companies are moving more and more into renewable energy, and we should support that. Some in renewable energies used to need incentives, now they don't, so that you can see a shift in the market. So there is certainly so much room for innovation in this arena, and there is a role for government. We have an issue with transmission, so we need to work on how we can incentivize potential transmission for companies to get there and to be able to have solar farms and wind farms and be able to transmit it to the customer. So I am open to all and every idea. We have a climate caucus in the Minnesota Senate with our colleagues, and we're trying to move in that direction. And I think you'll see more of that come January when we take back the Senate and we're able to work on those progressive agendas.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Franzen. And then, Melissa Franzen, we'll start with you on this next question. What can the Minnesota Legislature do to ensure that all Minnesotans can afford high-quality health care?
An issue that I don't think 90 seconds will be sufficient to address, but I will do my best. I believe people have a right to health care. It's a fundamental right. We are one of the most expensive places to have health care, and we don't have a lot of results to show for it. So we can do this. We have innovation in our district. Just in Bloomington, we have companies like Health Partners that are doing so much more to try to get into the communities that need more access to care. I have Optum, and I have United Healthcare, Children's Hospital, France Avenue. I have so much healthcare in my district, which I appreciate because I get to learn so much about the complexities of healthcare. But we all admire the big problem, which is the cost of healthcare. And we have to do a better job to negotiate, to be able to have a public option that can move us forward into healthcare for all. We have Minnesota Care, which is a robust program for the working poor. I love to see that all over the state so we can actually have people who lose their jobs have access to it, not just the working poor, but so many people who just lost their jobs because of this pandemic and might not gain one. COBRA is not a solution. So we need to address what those costs are. And if we have a Minnesota Care model where we can expand it for anyone who wishes. I am a small business owner myself, and I would love to be able to offer good, robust healthcare that my previous employer, Target, used to offer me. But it's really difficult when you don't have that negotiating power. So we need to address that, and I think we can find that way. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Melissa Wickland.
Yeah, access to good, high-quality health care is an issue that that all Minnesotans need to feel that they have a way to be able to do it in a affordable way. I've worked on some areas. Reducing our prescription drug costs is one area that we need to focus on as we move forward. We also need to look at other ways that we can understand where costs are and find ways to put pressure to reduce those costs. One of the ways that we should be exploring next year is definitely exploring whether we can expand the Minnesota Care that product or that program that's available to part of our population now, expand that so that there is a way for more Minnesotans to access healthcare through that program. It has affordable premiums, and we need to find a way for more people to have access to affordable premiums, especially when many who have been on employer-sponsored programs aren't able to access them if they're laid off. So that would be one area that I'd see us exploring. Also, maybe an option to explore a Minnesota Care type program for prescription drugs to make those affordable as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Wickland. So Melissa Wickland, we'll start with you with this next question. Minnesota is notorious for its educational achievement gap. What can the Minnesota Legislature do to address this, and how do we afford it?
Well, I think that the end of the question, how do we afford it, is really key. We have been trying to increase funding and since the Great Recession, and we have not caught up and have not been providing schools with adequate funding since they were exposed to many cuts during that period of time. And so we need to keep our eye on how do we facilitate getting back to the level of funding that is necessary, and to provide it in an equitable way so that all students have access to schools that are fulfilling their needs. It is going to be extremely challenging given the budget issues that we will be facing in the future, but I think that we have to keep in mind that we can't afford not to invest in our educational system from early childhood all the way through higher education, because our future workforce and all of that to support those of us who move into retirement years, we need to be educating all of our children. So I think that it's a very complex issue, and it's hard to sum up in 90 seconds. So thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. And it's terrible that we're notorious for it, but we can also be notorious for fixing it and being an example of how to turn it around. I would start with the paying for it. I think it pays for itself when we invest in education. And I have many examples of that 90 seconds won't be enough, but starts with early childhood education to have parental education to make sure parents have what they need to have their children be successful. Again, I just started kindergarten, and I'm just overwhelmed with all the decisions that I have to make already. I'm an educated person, and I feel sometimes already inundated with so much information. So when people are busy with a job, 2 jobs, or maybe they've never been to school and their child is going to the school for the first time, we have to have accessibility to what we're expecting parents to do. I also have noticed, as many of you, that schools are so important for children well-being and food safety and food security and family well-being. So this is not the time to cut funding for schools. This is the time to find out how we can collaborate. There's a great model of community service schools that we've tried to support. Maybe this is the time where we actually implement it and start working our way through. So if another pandemic or whatever crisis hits, we are better positioned to support our families, but we have to look at the robust services and look at schools in a different way, and I think that's a good model to look at in Minnesota. And also on higher ed, this is another thing that we should be able to support to your colleges as well.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. And Melissa Franzen, we'll start with you with this next question. Instead of the governor using emergency powers, what steps would you like to see the legislature take to control the pandemic in Minnesota?
That's a fair question, and I've gotten a lot of emails and phone calls from constituents concerned about the role of the legislature in a pandemic or any emergency after what we were experiencing. I think we should look back when we come back into session, how we can do a better job at collaborating the legislative branch with the executive branch. Unfortunately, it's a little bit politicized right now because the elections are around the corner, but I think there is a way that we can prepare for the next emergency, because they will be a next one, and we've never experienced this in our lifetime. So there is a role for the government, for the governor to have executive powers to do things he needs to do when we're not in session, and be nimble and be flexible. He cannot appropriate, or she cannot appropriate funds, so that's the role of the legislature. So we worked with the executive branch to do a fund that he would have, in this case, Governor Walz, accessible to buy PPE and other important supports like childcare. We actually did emergency grants, at least 2 rounds, and we're going on the 3rd one of emergency child grants, because we know that we needed first responders and essential workers to have that support, and our children needed it as well. So there is a way. I think we'll just have to look back and see where we can have some common sense solutions to move forward of how this the next chapter of COVID-19, which is not going to go away in January, but we will have to continue to tackle over the year. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Melissa Wickland.
Yes, I believe that we do need to be working collaboratively with the governor on any solutions that we need to move forward. But I would say that I don't know if the question is really that instead of his ability to use emergency powers, I believe that it's going to take a combination of emergency powers and executive actions and work that the legislature can do. I think that we do need to be, as a legislature, responsive and develop ways to hold hearings and have discussions about key areas that may need policy change or funding changes and appropriations. And we haven't seen much of that in the Senate this past few months. But I think that that's part of it. But I do think that the governor's ability to declare a peacetime emergency, to have the tools he needs to address things in a quick and efficient manner, there are some things that the legislature is not going to be in a position to respond to in a timely way that these executive actions can do. And that includes things like purchasing PPE, and exploring, ways to get emergency equipment to people as they need it. So, thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. The next one, then we'll start with Melissa Wickland.
Okay.
Would you like to see the Metropolitan Council strengthened, or would you rather see more local municipal autonomy? Should the Met Council be reformed? If so, how?
Well, I think that the Met Council does a very good job in many of the areas that it is charged with. Because we are a large metropolitan area, there are things that need to be done on a regional basis, and the Met Council is set up, I think, well to do those things. If you look at the way that we handle our wastewater treatment systems and transit, and I think that the Met Council does a great job with that, coordinating use of dollars for our parks, regional parks, things like that in the metropolitan area. So I definitely think that the model to me is working. I think that people have concerns about the way that the members of the Met Council are put in place, and right now it's the governor has the sole ability to select and appoint the people. And I think there are some changes that could be made to the process that's used for that appointment that could improve the way that's done. So I have been involved in discussions like that. We haven't come to agreement on a solution that enough of us agree on, and the governor. But I know that will be something that we will discuss next year in the session.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franson.
Thank you, and I think that was a good description of what needs to happen in terms of any reform or reorg. There's a lot of conflict about who serves on the Met Council, their authority, and the composition and the number of appointees, whether they should be staggered. There was a review done by the Citizens League with their recommendations. Those were put on the table. I think there's a lot of common ground to move forward with a lot of those recommendations, and I do believe we could come to agreement next session on what those look like. But they perform a really important function, and it has been a model that's worked in other places as well. And Minnesota usually leads when it comes to similar structures in place for the jurisdiction of wastewater and other areas like buses and transit. And I worked closely with them in my 8 years in the transportation committee. So I've focused mostly on the transportation aspect, and I think they do a really good service of advocating for Minnesotans, not just the metro, but the entire state, because it makes our state more robust when we have good infrastructure in the area that we need to attract jobs and attract companies that are coming to Minnesota, still coming to Minnesota to grow their base, and we're happy to have them. So I support the Met Council, and I support reinventing it for a better outcome in the future for our state and our region.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Franson. And Melissa Franson, we'll start with you with this next question. Would you support the recreational use of marijuana in Minnesota? Why or why not?
Well, I have been the lead sponsor in the Minnesota Senate on the issue of recreational use of cannabis, and I support it because I think it's inevitable. I think it's something that has already been happening in other states. It's how do we do it in a responsible way where, again, we can be a model. We can learn a lot from other states that have done it. It does not only bring revenue, it has to deal with an issue of equity as well, with criminalization of low possession of marijuana has been sometimes what's been used. And I worked in the public defender's office in Hennepin County, and I remember reading many police reports dealing with cannabis. It's something that needs to be addressed, and the mental health addiction piece and how we can safely have it guarded from our teens and our kids. But it's also got a medicinal purpose, and we have a very restrictive medical program in Minnesota that we also are trying to make more robust so the cost can go down, more people can benefit from it. So I think it needs to stop being taboo, and we've been having those conversations over the last 2 years, and I think Minnesotans are ready to legalize it in a responsible way with all stakeholders involved. And it's an industry that's growing across the country. Hemp is another area. So I look forward to making it happen in a responsible way with all the concerns that people and parents particularly have. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Franson. Melissa Wickland.
I would definitely support moving forward with more in-depth discussions and legislation to bring legalization to Minnesota, and I believe I would support a bill that would do that. I hear from constituents that this is something that is a priority to them, and as Senator Franson mentioned, there are many reasons. Not only that adults feel that they should be able to have responsible and legal access to it. And I think that can be done, that we can build a system that does provide that responsible access. My big concerns as we develop any legislation would be that we prioritize funding to go to educational systems to make sure that we have very high standards for our youth prevention programs, and that we are helping young people understand the the impact that use of marijuana can have on young people. So I have a lot of desire to see that any discussion move forward that prioritizes protection of our youth from any side effects of legalization. Thank you.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. And Melissa Wickland, we'll start with you with this next question. What 2 priorities will you push for in the next bonding bill, and why?
Since we haven't been able to successfully move forward with the bonding bill for quite some time, I am continuing to push forward a bill or a bonding project that's in Richfield. That is the 77th Street Underpass project. And it is something that I was able to successfully gain some funding for a number of years ago. But the project has built up a federal, a state, and a Met Council funding kind of a budget, and they need some additional funding from the state bonding programs to move forward with it. And so I'm really, that's really my number one priority for this year, is to see that bonding money comes to Richfield so that they have a complete package of funding and can move forward with the 77th Street underpass. That project is important because it would provide a alternative to 494 when they start to do construction on 494. 77th Street would be a way to access the road through Richfield and all the way to the airport, and then over to Bloomington. So that's my number one priority right now.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. And I should have announced this earlier. This is the last question, and then we'll go to your closing remarks.
Okay.
So to finish or to answer this question, over to Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. So for bonding, 2 things. One, specific to Bloomington, is the Normandale College bonding proposal to do this phase 2 of their Normandale College services building. So that is one thing that I would certainly push for. There's also funding for HEAPR, which is dollars that is also goes for infrastructure for our state assets in colleges and institutions of higher education. The other piece is funding of the Southwest Metro Public Safety Training Facility in Edina, which services the entire region, including Bloomington and other suburbs, and frankly, the entire state. They collaborate to train police officers and also firefighters and first responders. And when you hear rhetoric about defunding police, certainly that is not something you're hearing in the Minnesota Senate. None of us have talked about defunding. In fact, we've talked about investing and supporting our public safety officers and first responders. So that's a project that I am lead sponsor in the Minnesota Senate and would service the entire region and frankly the state, because a lot of other areas that don't have a training facility, this is where they can practice how to put a fire out in a building and so forth, and have fire range practice areas. They can rent the space and to this facility, and also be able to have those advantages of training in a state-of-the-art facility. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Okay, now we'll proceed to closing remarks. And because we started opening remarks with Melissa Franzen, we'll start with Melissa Wickland. For 1 minute, please.
Okay. Thank you. And first, thank you again to the League for having this opportunity for us to talk about so many diverse topics tonight. We covered a lot of variety in topics, but there's still many areas that we haven't talked about, and so I certainly hope that if voters, if constituents have not heard me talk about something that is an issue that is of interest to you, I hope you'll reach out and get in touch with me. My office phone number is 651-297-8061. I'm certainly open to talking by phone and addressing any issues you have. I want to stay working in the Minnesota Senate to be addressing the key issues that our state faces, including our budget and moving forward, and also finding ways to improve education systems and healthcare for all Minnesotans. So thank you again.
Thank you to Melissa Wickland. Melissa Franzen, your closing remark, please.
Thank you. And I just want to start and end by saying that you've heard a lot of noise and there's a lot of anxiety in society today. And certainly the election November 3rd is very important. So I will stress, please vote. That is your civic duty and your right to express who you want to lead you in our state and our country. I want to stress that COVID-19 is real. It's a current issue, and that we all have to do our part. The role of government in a pandemic is important. We've all noticed that in the last months. And the role of good government requires us not to dismantle it, not to dismantle our institutions, but foster more trust and restore public civic duty to adhere to what the government is trying to do. We all came at this. It's not a lucrative position. It's an honorary position to represent our districts and our constituents. But I do want to express the thanks I have for doing that over the last 8 years. And please vote. And you can start voting early, just as early as September 18th.
Great. Thank you to Melissa Franzen. Thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum and for your willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. Thank you to the League of Women Voters Bloomington for sponsoring this forum. Thank you to our at-home audience for watching this recorded forum. Remember to vote on or before Election Day, November 3, 2020. For information about registering to vote, voting early, and voting in person, visit the Minnesota Secretary of State's website, www.mnvotes.org. Thank you, and this concludes our candidate program tonight.